were cramped into small, smelly cigar factories all over the east side. It was hot. We couldn't open the windows. We worked 11 hours a day, 6 days a week. We worked piecework. We couldn't get up to go to the lavatory because we were afraid to lose a couple cigars.
Meanwhile, the American Federation of Teachers was organizing across the nation, and one organizer landed in Detroit. As you can imagine, he found an interested audience. Some of the teachers joined the AFT as a strategy to get higher wages, but unions were considered radical in 1919.
There should be a 5th grade for a black marcher who died, but because he was black, he couldn't be buried at Woodmere. The relatives of the dead insisted that they be buried as close to the destination of the Hunger March as possible.
Whether it's the 1932 Ford Hunger March massacre, the first efforts to organize teachers, or the miserable conditions in Detroit's once flourishing cigar industry, these stories and the men and women who lived them come alive through the Detroit Labor History Tour project.
John Revip and Ron Alpern and some others of us who were classroom teachers and labor educators were really struck by the absence of materials on labor history for the people of the city of Detroit. If you were a scholar, a professional labor historian, you could go to the Reuther archives, you could go to the unions themselves and dig up this material. But for the sons and daughters of union members and for the teachers who taught these children in the schools, there was nothing.
The project's varied materials suit a wide range of educational and union needs. The book, Working Detroit, brings the city's social and industrial history to life. The slideshows and videotapes enliven a classroom discussion or set the tone for a local union meeting. And the guided bus tours bring a special immediacy to social and workplace issues.
We produced a 20-minute slide tape show that allows us to provide people an overview for Detroit labor history before we take them on a tour and discuss the details of a particular event. We've also found that this slideshow is very helpful for sparking discussion in classrooms or at union halls.
Unions grew. In Detroit, the UAW-CIO won recognition for over 100,000 workers in automotive parts and assembly plants, while the AFL organized thousands of new members and chartered 16 new locals. Over the next 4 years, the AFL and the CIO organized to protect and sustain gains made during the sit-downs. They organized the city's Teamsters, rubber and steel workers, department store and government employees. Yet, the Ford Motor Company remained unorganized. Sheldon Taps recalls that fear was a major weapon used against workers.
When I was marching in the Labor Day parade, I had my Ford badge pinned on my lapel, and as I got to the Fox Theater, a man stepped out from the curb and took a good look at my badge, as though he wanted to remember the numbers on it. And I guess he did remember them pretty well, because the next day I found myself fired.
Region 1B purchased the slide tape show and donated it to for use in Oakland County, and I think I'm seriously thinking of getting another one from Macomb County. Certainly the purpose of making the tape available to libraries and the school system in this county certainly would enhance and help the school system, help the libraries, implement educational programs that would certainly help people have an understanding as to what happened in labor history.
After an audience from a high school, a college, a union group, tourists or conventioneers have seen the slideshow, we physically board the group onto a bus and take them around the city so that they can have it come alive to them, seeing the sights and the places with the stories that the show and the tour guide is talking about. So we'll go to Kelsey Hayes and hear about sit-down strikes, go to the Rouge, the Battle of the Overpass, ethnic halls, Cadillac Square, the site of so many important union and civil rights rallies, Chrysler's Jefferson plant, and the Poletown plant, bringing to life reindustrialization questions today. One of the high points of the tours is to stop at the Detroit Institute of Arts and to look at the Diego Rivera murals.
For the labor historian, the real significance of these murals at the Detroit Institute of Arts is that Diego Rivera has created for all time an intimate and detailed view of industrial life in the 1930s. For those on a tour, we can chronicle the conditions of factory life as well as the tremendous changes that have occurred since this time. For example, Rivera's vision of a multiracial workforce working in harmony is precisely the opposite from what was the standard industrial practice in the 1930s. In fact, it took a 4-year campaign on the part of the UAW to break down these racial barriers and create a workforce that was united, that was key to winning the first contract at Ford in 1941.
In 1984, our union, the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union, held its convention, its international convention in Detroit. And I made arrangements for the Labor History Bus Tour to sponsor a day, it was an afternoon as I remember, to take our delegates and staff members from throughout the country on the tour. And that when people came back, and I made it a point to ask them what the response was, they were ecstatic in terms of finding out that something like this existed in the city of Detroit, and many of them commented they wished that this kind of an effort was done in their city because they also had a labor history and it was not recorded anywhere, and there was no opportunity for themselves, their families, or young people to know anything about this.
Often our tours will include a lunch stop at Hamtramck's Polonia restaurant, formerly the Detroit Workmen's Cooperative Restaurant.
So they basically started this co-op restaurant as a way of providing meals for the large numbers of unattached men and other workers as well. And it had a really sort of diverse background. It was a place where ultimately a lot of pro-labor people initially met. A lot of their meetings would be here. During strikes and other mobilizations, this place would often be a source of food for strikers and whatnot. Upstairs is a hall above us here where a lot of the early union organizing meetings, Foreign Language Federation, Socialist Party meetings were held. And a little postscript to all of this, when we were researching the book and looking for photographs, Ron was poking around here at the restaurant, and upstairs we found one of the shots we eventually used in the book. It's on page 40 if you want to take a look at it.
I'm really happy to have a chance to take one of my classes and some students from the American Culture Program on a tour that brings to them the sort of information that has usually been not brought to people, especially to working people, who are the majority of students at Flint. It's a sort of history that is crucial for people to understand, to make sense out of their everyday lives.
Well, we started out with the labor history murals at the Art Institute, the Rivera murals, and I found that particularly interesting because it gave us a perspective from the time and also a perspective from a minority viewpoint. And then we continued on to some more concrete things and saw the plants in the area and some of the neighborhoods that the working people came from.
It was all very interesting in that not only did I see historical spots, but I was amazed at the amount of history that was incorporated in the presentation. I learned a lot from it today, and it's something that I wish every union member, every UAW member in the whole country could see.
Well, the book initially came out of a project where we produced a brief tour guide of Detroit, and we then approached the Michigan Council for the Humanities for funding to produce a longer book, something we initially thought would be 60 pages and take us a year to produce. But the labor history of Detroit is a very rich and full subject, and there was no way we could complete that in 60 pages. So it took us actually 4 years and 260 pages to finally bring out Working Detroit, the Making of a Union Town. And that book really takes it from the 19th century up through the beginning years of the auto industry, through the organizing and the Depression years of the 1930s, and up to the present. We've tried to cover a wide range of issues, and in fact, one of the reasons we had to make the book as long as it was is that labor history really is an opportunity to cover such a wide range of issues. We can really think of it as a prism that allows us to look at ethnic history and the history of the civil rights movement and the history of technology and the history of the auto industry and a whole real medley of issues that we can pull together under a single cover and make available to people who aren't generally going to be exposed to history.
The book, Working Detroit, is fascinating, both for novices toward the labor movement and for people who know something about it. It is, after all, Detroit was the seat of the labor movement. The beginnings were here. And the book contains pictures and writing. It's very good. It's right to the point. It's not dull and boring. It is excellent.
Not only does the hope of the world in this country rest on working people coming together, but I think people like those I represent, the blacks and the browns and the many millions of others who still are left out of the system, you and those you write about provide the best hope. Thank you.
Place the power greater than the hoarded gold, greater than the might of armies magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the Union makes us strong. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity